Boom. All right. Can people hear me? Jump in the chat, say hello. If anybody can hear me, my name is Benj, and let me know where you guys are coming in from. We will obviously just wait a tiny bit until everyone kind of gets rolling here. But yeah, say hi. I can see things flooding in. Hello from Oslo. That's my son's name. That's super fun. Man, I cannot even keep up with this chat. You guys are blowing it up. So cool. Sheesh, I'm gonna have to open this thing up a little bit more so I can see all of the stuff going on. Boom, boom. Minnesota, Canada, the Bronx, more Canadians. Dude, Canada, 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 represent. Czech Republic, Jamaica, let's go. All right, just gonna check out the view here. Make sure we're doing all the right stuff. I should have got some background music so we could just be pumping in some stuff, but oh well. Scotland, Germany, Colorado, LA, more Germany, a Colombian living in Dallas. Let's go. Okay, so a couple of quick things. Obviously, we're going to be starting soon once we kind of make sure that everything is filling up how we're supposed to be. A few quick things that they wanted me to note. When you're using the chat, there is the difference between you can use the chat section where you can send to all or just send to panelists. If you send to all or send to panelists and attendees or however that thing works, that would be best, so then everyone can see your question and maybe that will inspire them to have another question or however that's going to work. And let's see here. I want to just make sure that everything is going on. And we'll say this a few different times, but this definitely will be rebroadcast a few different times. You can, well, not a few different times, but it will be rebroadcast, but you can go view it on the Pic-Time YouTube channel, which I'm sure someone can, I guess, toss a link to maybe in the chat or something. But then you can come and watch this at any time you want. So if you ended up, I guess you're joining right now, but if you have to leave halfway through or something like that, you can jump on the YouTube channel later and pick up wherever you left off. And then we will do our best to answer questions at the end, but we'll see kind of how things go. Most likely, okay, so yeah, Pic-Time just tossed the replay available, which will be great. Most likely, Pei and I, who I'll introduce in a second, will be sort of asking each other questions and maybe monitoring the chat depending on how it goes throughout. But then they'll make sure to send us some questions and we'll leave time at the end to, yeah, make sure that we get any questions that you might have, because obviously sometimes I'll be clicking quick keys or buttons that I just do by default and I'll forget that it is something that not everybody knows about. I know that I've done Lightroom tutorials in the past and just clicked a random button or used a feature that no one, I heard an audible gasp in the room one time where it was just like an auto leveling tool. And apparently no one knew that, but I just thought it was something that everybody did. So yeah, we'll try to answer questions. So if you have questions throughout, ask them in the chat and we will try to kind of flag the most common ones and stuff like that. And then we'll obviously try to get to as many of them throughout our presentation as possible.
I make a suggestion. Sorry, please, to interrupt you.
No.
There is the Q&A section that's separate from the chat. So maybe we direct people to ask their questions in the Q&A section.
Is there a Q&A section of
chat? Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know where that is. So thank you, Pei.
Yeah. I mean, I can help you with that during the Q&A time.
Fantastic.
So great.
Awesome.
So yeah, questions in the Q&A section, just general jibber jabber chat stuff in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. We'll rock and roll. I will try to find out where that thing is. Oh, Q&A. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So in the bottom, actually, Pei, you know exactly where it is, and you were explaining it to me. So why don't you let everybody know where the thing is?
Yeah, it's just that along that navigation bar on the bottom, on the far right of the center icons is a little Q&A button that's separate from the little chat button on the left side. So just drop the Q&A questions, any questions there, and then we will be able to see them more easily.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. So yeah, for anybody who is just joining in, oh yeah, so we already are getting new questions in here, which is great. So yeah, dump those in to the Q&A thing. That would be great. And I guess as we're going in, if you are joining in and you haven't yet, you can sort of like introduce yourself slightly in the chat and say where you're coming from, where you're watching from, how the weather is. I know Rob just asked me how the weather is in Seattle, and it of course is 38 degrees and raining. So perfect December weather. But I guess I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Benj Haisch, and I've been a wedding photographer for almost 15 years. I will admittedly say that I did my first 4 weddings. I processed them in iPhoto. So, and then I found out that Lightroom existed and have literally been using it almost every day for the past probably 12 years ever since. And I'm generally a gear nerd, but not so much of a nerd that I know every little intricacy of every little thing in Lightroom. But I will say that someone that has created lots of presets and just worked on Lightroom for years and years and years, I feel like I have a decent grasp of everything that's going on. And then I'll introduce Pei a little bit, and then she can obviously continue to expound upon that. But Pei, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you work as like the community outreach person for Adobe for Lightroom in particular. Is that correct?
Yeah, like in general, I'm on the product marketing team, so I do other product marketing things, but community is under my purview, and that entails basically any sort of community touch points that we have, I kind of run or help run. So I run the Lightroom Ambassador program, I help with the events, I find instructors and speakers for any of the things that we're doing. And then, you know, if we're doing things in person, I run in-person events and stuff like that, just kind of networking, bringing the community together. Prior to me working at Adobe, there wasn't really anybody on the Lightroom team who was specifically tasked with like community building and outreach. And I think that was a huge miss, which is part of the reason they brought me on. So I'm happy to be here and doing that. And I can go ahead and just continue if you want, or if you did you have more to say that, or do you want me to jump in?
No, the only thing I wanted to add is that Pei, obviously, if you don't follow her on Instagram already, you have like 700,000 followers on Instagram. Obviously, you know what you're doing. So you're not just some like corporate whatever person that happens to work at Adobe. I actually met you for the first time when we did the Ektachrome beta test for Kodak when they were re-releasing Ektachrome. We were one of like the, I guess, 10 people or so in that group that we kind of like got to see each other's work and stuff before that film got released. Yeah. And so it was cool to like get to know you sort of through that a little bit, and then obviously follow your work since then and whatnot. And then now knowing that you do all this stuff for Adobe, it was a cool connection. And I feel like when I see somebody in a role like this, a community outreach kind of thing, or like, I guess more of like a corporate-y type of position that I actually know is a photographer and like knows the ropes of that whole thing. And I respect your work and I see your creativity outside of just this kind of stuff. I feel like that gives added depth to who you are as a person and what you bring to the table in this. So anyway, I just want to say I appreciate that about you. And yeah.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is truly a pleasure for me to be able to see both sides of the coin. So Lightroom, you know, the Lightroom team brought me in from the community to lead the community efforts, which I think is really smart of them. And I do have to say that honestly, so many of the Lightroom team themselves are actually photographers. So there are a lot of products that are built by people who don't actually use the products, and that's not the case at all when it comes to Lightroom. Like, so many of us are photographers, we love photography and are like deeply entrenched in this whole system, and we are building tools that we want, which is one of the really cool things. So yeah, a little bit of background about me. I'm a longtime photographer. I've been shooting for over 20 years now, and I actually was a wedding photographer myself about 15 or so years ago. And I did it.
You passed the baton to me that exact moment.
Yeah. I think I only did it for 3 or 4 years. I realized it wasn't quite the type of photography that I wanted to be doing, like career-wise. So I stepped away from it a little bit, but I know where you're coming from when it comes to like editing massive amounts of images that you take in a weekend and trying to get through all of it. I actually honestly started shooting weddings before just before Lightroom came out. So my early weddings, I edited in Photoshop, one image at a time. And I even, I did a lot of, I ran actions. I don't know if any of you are old timers here, but I ran actions in Photoshop on my wedding photos. So I've been doing it for a long time. I am based in San Francisco and, work at Adobe. And what else am I going to say? I'm very distracted now seeing my own photos, but it's very fun to be here.
I don't know if anybody's actually watching, but I'm scrolling through Pei's Instagram right now, so you can actually see that she's not just some like corporate snob.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is certainly important for people to know. So I'm definitely there using the tools as well. Masking is one of the newest, like most exciting things to come to Lightroom in a long time. So I'm stoked that you guys are all here to learn more about it. And I think we can probably dive in, unless you think we should be waiting for.
No, definitely. I think we should. I just looked at the clock and went, oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Too much chit chat and small talk. One of the questions that I did want to ask, and you can sort of do like a quick version of this probably, but one of the things that I get asked all the time is there's that difference between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic, and then it was Lightroom CC, and there's like the mobile app, and you can use it on your iPad and stuff. So can you give us like a quick rundown from like your perspective of what the tools are, what they're best for, and just an overview of that stuff for those who might be confused.
Yes, I'm actually going to do you one better and do a little presentation about it, if that's okay. Yeah, I have slides to share and everything.
Please.
So let's
go
ahead and share my screen. You should be able to see Keynote and a little Lightroom Classic versus Lightroom screen, right? Can you see that?
I can see it, yes.
Good. All right. So before we dive in, like you said, this is super important for everyone to know and understand. And I'm guessing just based on the audience, like Pic-Time audience, a lot of, based on what a lot of Pic-Time folks tend to be shooting, most people are going to be in Lightroom Classic. But it's really important to understand what the other Lightroom is and what it can do and what the differences are. So I want to just clarify a few things. I'm going to jump in and hopefully it'll help you. If it doesn't, I'm not presenting this to change your mind and like push you to a different Lightroom than the one you're using. I want you to know that I just want you to know what's going on our end, so you know that you're making the right decision. And then also, so many folks who are listening are probably also leaders in their community, and people are asking them, like you, Benj, like, what should I be using, or what's the difference, and why might I choose one over the other? So let me go through that quickly. I'm not going to go through this whole slide. I actually encourage you to like take a screenshot or a photo with it of your photo with your phone or something if you want to reference it later. But in general, the differences, and these are almost like one-to-one across, except that Lightroom on the right has one additional line. So you can see basically like, Lightroom Classic is more desktop centric versus Lightroom, which is cloud-based and, local file storage and all of that stuff. But the crux of it is going to be on the next screen. So take your screenshot, and I'm going to move on to the next screen. If I was to distill it down to some of the benefits of using cloud-based Lightroom, and again, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just trying to tell you why many people, and why we would encourage you to, if you're a new user and you don't need Lightroom Classic, and I'll explain why you might need Lightroom Classic. If you're a new user coming in and you don't need some of the things that Lightroom Classic offers you, some of the benefits of using Lightroom, the cloud-based version, are that you do have that cloud-based storage that you can sync across your devices. So no matter what, you'll be able to access your full res original files from anywhere, which is pretty incredible. So I can travel, I can lose my phone, I can lose my laptop, and still be able to like log into the web and access my full res files, which is pretty cool. So Like I said, I've been a long time Lightroom user. So of course I, spent 10 years working in Lightroom Classic, and then slowly, especially because I'm not shooting weddings and stuff anymore, I've made my way over to working exclusively in the cloud-based Lightroom. And I have to say, like, when I am traveling and a client, I'm not traveling during COVID, but pre-COVID, when I was traveling and a client would email me and say, hey, can you just send us the like full res files of whatever it is from that shoot from like 4 years ago? Before, I was just like, well, you're going to have to wait till I get home, figure out which of my piles of hard drives it's on, and then like find the classic catalog that's tied to it and then export it again. And now I can just like open up my phone and email it to them instantly, which is kind of incredible. So I love that. It's really the way that the best system for me. And I'll talk about like why it might not be the best system for you in a second. So these are some of the benefits, the main benefits of Lightroom that I wanted to convey. And then, of course, there are some notable things that are missing from Lightroom. Lightroom is changing and evolving very, very quickly because it's our newer product. So the idea is that we are going to get it to as close to full parity with Lightroom Classic as possible. But some notable things, these are things that people tend to, like, we know that like it's either an intentional thing that we are not building in Lightroom, or something that people are like, hey, I really want to use Lightroom, but it doesn't have things like survey and compare views or also reference view. Some people are really tied to something like the history panel. And then, output modules like Lightroom Classic has, the library, develop, and all those different like print web slideshow modules. Those are not in Lightroom. We can do keywording in Lightroom, but not hierarchical keywording or smart collections. And then probably most importantly, tethering is not available in Lightroom, nor are third-party plugins. So just to kind of put those out on the table so you know that those things are not currently available in Lightroom. And then
they're available in Lightroom Classic.
Correct.
It's like I think the normal like vocabulary and lexicon is, if I say Lightroom to somebody that is one of my peers, we all are still thinking of it in terms of Lightroom Classic. And so just like throwing that out there to the world that people are like, wait, no, there's no tethering in Lightroom. No, there is. We're going to get into it, but just want to
actually, I totally missed this at the start of my presentation. You probably saw when I had it first loaded up, that first screen, it was like Lightroom Classic and then Lightroom CC, but with the CC crossed out. We frustrated, like, I'm on the marketing team, right? So I'm like out there talking to people and being like, hey, you should buy our products, right? But people are very confused, like, wait, Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, like Lightroom ecosystem, Lightroom CC, what's what? We've like shot ourselves in the foot with our naming, and it's frustrating for us as well. But there are a lot of decisions, or a lot of people that kind of have a voice in what products get named, of course. So it's not always our decision. But Lightroom Classic has this logo that you see here. And thankfully, we added the C to the logo because, a year or two ago, it was literally two logos that said LR. And we had to distinguish based on like whether they had rounded corners, like square or rounded corners. So that was terrible. But now it's a little bit easier. So Lightroom Classic is the Lightroom that you've known and loved for many years. It used to be just Lightroom. Now it's called Lightroom Classic. The newer Lightroom that was introduced about 4 years ago was called Lightroom CC when we first introduced it. We've pretty immediately dropped the CC from the moniker, but it has a way of, has had this tendency of sticking around, so people still call it Lightroom CC. So now it's just Lightroom. So it's literally Lightroom Classic versus Lightroom. And sometimes, as a way of distinguishing it, we'll say Lightroom Classic or the Lightroom ecosystem, because the ecosystem is meant to describe like the interplay between the different surfaces that you can use it on. So here, actually, Lightroom on desktop, web, mobile, so any sort of like mobile device. So Lightroom Classic versus the Lightroom ecosystem, or cloud-based Lightroom, any of those Lightroom formerly known as CC, that it's like everybody refers to it as many different things. For us, we generally say Lightroom Classic versus Lightroom Desktop or Ecosystem. Or like we're specifically referring to it as like Lightroom Mobile or something like that.
Yeah. I know. I even say Lightroom Mobile.
Yeah.
And Lightroom CC, because I got used to that. But yeah, I think these are interesting and important distinctions because a lot of people usually get confused about all those things. So there's our dictionary.
So just really quickly to finish this up. So Lightroom Classic, and I see people weighing in the chat about like, oh, what it should have been. I mean, we all have the same ideas about like what it should have been or could have been, and like ways to have made it easier. But there's kind of no going back at this point. So this is what it is. Lightroom Classic is available on desktop only. That's what probably most of you are familiar with and have been using for a long time. Lightroom is available on all of these different surfaces. It syncs the full res originals between all devices, and they're stored in the cloud. And so there's this intersection of like, or interaction of like these, the Lightroom ecosystem side all syncing with one another. And the confusing thing about it, I should say, it's not confusing if you think of them as two entirely separate entities. So on your computer, you can be sitting here and you can have, like if you're on a Mac, you have your little dock, you can actually have Lightroom Classic as one program that sits and lives right next to Lightroom Desktop, which is another program. So a lot of people aren't clear on that because they're like, I'm working on my desktop, so I must be in Lightroom Classic, but there is a Lightroom Desktop program that's entirely separate and different from Lightroom Classic, mostly in UI. So the functionality is largely the same, but the UI is different. So it does take some getting used to once you do make the change, if you do make the change. So the confusing part I wanted to mention is that, yes, the ecosystem syncs with itself, which is fine and fairly easy to understand. The confusing thing is that there is also a little bit of syncing between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom, the ecosystem. So a lot of Classic users do take advantage of this, but the thing to know about this sync and link between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom is that there are certain limitations. So right now you can only sync one catalog at a time, and you have to sync, you have to manually sync individual collections. So really, one of the reasons why that's the case is because most of our Lightroom catalogs or Lightroom Classic catalogs are massive. And we don't really want to be syncing, hundreds of thousands of images. So we ask that you manually select the collections that you want to sync. And it's important to know that these are smart preview sized. So they're not going to be like the full res images being synced across. So the last thing is, because I know that we want to get into the masking part of it, but the last thing I wanted to say is that generally, when people say and wonder, like if you're new coming into Lightroom, which are, a lot of people are brand new, a lot of people have been doing this for a while, but there's still so many new people becoming photographers and starting to edit now. Which one should I use and why should I use, one over the other? So in general, right now, the recommendation is that the people who tend to be extremely high volume photographers, and we're talking like thousands of photos per shoot and multiple shoots per week. So generally like wedding photographers, sports photographers, that sort of thing. Those people should be using a system like Lightroom Classic that allows them to store files locally, because cloud storage does get expensive after a while. And it's really hard to do that if you're a very high volume shooter. And then studio photographers who rely on tethering. That's the other population of photographer who should use Lightroom Classic, because there's no tethering in Lightroom. But other than that, everyone else, the recommendation is that you use Lightroom because it has so many other benefits. So that's my little spiel. I have no idea how long. Yeah, I think that was my planned 10 minutes of talking about this. So yeah, let's go ahead and I'm going to escape out of here. And I think I can stop my sharing. Wait, pause share. Oh, stop share. So from here, Benj, do you want me to jump into talking about masking?
Yeah, please. I know that So for what it's worth, one of the reasons why we want to talk about that is just because that is like one of the most asked questions that I get all the time. And there's a lot of confusion around that. So since Pei is here and knows way more about that, that's why I specifically really wanted her to cover that different thing. But we'll definitely jump into more of the technicals. Pei, you can kind of describe, what's going on with the new updates and stuff like that. And then I have about 6, 7, 8 images or whatever that I found that work really well. And I can show you how we work them in my work, and then we'll try to get to any questions we have. So yeah, let's roll, Pei.
Yeah, great. Sounds good.
One last thing. Sorry, I totally spaced. And we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. If you can ask those questions in the Q&A, that would be great. And then for those who have joined later, if you missed anything at the beginning, this is streamed on YouTube, so you can go back and watch this at any time. And now let's go.
Great, thank you. So most of you guys are probably here to learn specifically about masking, because that's what we were planning to talk about and spend the bulk of our time talking about today. So in October, our new release of Lightroom Classic, as well as Lightroom, so all of the Lightrooms, so everything that I'm talking about today, I should say, when it comes to masking, everything that I'm talking about is available no matter which Lightroom you're using. Even if you're only using Lightroom Mobile on your phone, masking is available there as well. So what I'm going to be showing today is Lightroom Classic, because I believe most people who are watching today are probably utilizing Lightroom Classic based on the type of photography they do. So masking, if you haven't really played with it a lot yet, is our sort of re-envisioning of the selective adjustment tools that were previously available. So they were more available in Lightroom Classic than Lightroom previously, but this release kind of brought them all up to par. So they are identical across the different Lightrooms. And let me go ahead and share my screen. If I share this, yeah, you probably can't see the whole thing, it looks like. Let me stop. I have to share my whole screen. It says Lightroom Classic, but it separates it into different panels. So I can share like just the bottom or just the side. So let me do desktop 1. And can you see Lightroom Classic?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I have to move my little faces too. Okay. So masking came to Lightroom in October, and masking takes full advantage of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So like those are the buzzwords that we always kind of throw around when it comes to masking, and I'll show you why it's so cool. So, so generally speaking, I'm right now in the develop module of Lightroom Classic. So this is probably very familiar to you. Along the right side is our panel with the different editing tools. Let me go ahead and show a photo so everything's kind of populated. So what you probably have noticed is that this button on the right, let me see if I can say turn on. I meant to turn on my little pointer tool and I didn't do that. And I don't know if I can do it at this point. So, it's going to take me a while to figure it out. I don't remember how to do it. So I'll just make little squiggles so you can see what I'm pointing at. So, because you can see my mouse, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
So on the right side here is this new tool, this new icon. And this is, when you click on it, it will open up the different masking options. Oh, let me reset this. Oh, sorry, I meant to do that. I thought I had done that actually. So Benj, I know you were like resetting all your masks right before we started. I thought I did that last night, but I think then I was practicing and then I forgot to do it. So I apologize. So this masking button is the new button. It is where the other buttons that you used to see there, like the brush, the linear gradient, the radial gradient. So those tools used to be there on that original sort of menu option panel here. So now those are within the masking panel. So most people are probably familiar with what the brush, like the adjustment brushes, the linear gradient and the radial gradients do. So given the fact that we don't have too much time, I mean, I can spend like an entire 90 minutes just on masking alone. We don't have that much time. So what I do want to point out are, I want to do like a quick demo of some of the coolest parts of it so that you can see, and then I'll talk a little bit about like some of the technical parts of it. And then we'll go into like Benj with his like beautiful wedding images, and you can kind of dive into that a little bit more. So the cool like artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff is comes from things like with these tools, especially the first two, select subject and select sky. So if I tap select subject now and just wait, what will happen is that this machine learning stuff does the work in the background and selects my subject automatically for me, or it selects like the most prominent subject. It's kind of making a guess, right? And generally it guesses fairly well. So you can see that the mask has been created on top of the subject in this image. Right now it's highlighted in red. So I can actually, click this red button on the bottom right of this masking. Oops, sorry. I was gonna move it, yeah. Bottom right of this masking panel that popped up when I created the mask. And I can actually change the color of the overlay if I need to, if it's kind of hard for me. Sorry, I need to click on a specific part. Oh, okay, that was actually a great demo of a tool I wasn't planning on demoing, but if you need to see your overlay in a different way, some people like to see it very obviously, white on black, that sort of thing. I like to keep it the standard. But I just wanted to show that you can change your mask color if you'd like. So the other thing that is important to point out is that new here is the ability to rename your masks. So masking in general is new and different. And I do have to say, before I dive in, it is not exactly the same as layering in Photoshop. If you're used to working with layers in Photoshop, it is not the same in that it is not actually like creating or separating out layers in your image. It's just a smart way of doing, like a smarter way of doing selective adjustments and like targeted editing, like you used to be able to do in Lightroom. Like we've always been able to do that through like adjustment brushes and linear gradients and radial gradients, but this is like next level selective adjustments, but it's not quite layering in Photoshop, even though it might throw you off that these masks kind of look like the layers in Photoshop. So that's important to note. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
So my question with that would then be, since they don't act like layers in exactly the same way, but does it matter which order they are in terms of like where they're stacked on top of each other? Would that matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it does actually. And I don't even think that you can like move it the way that you would move layers in Photoshop, because it's not like, you're working in a document and you need to like send one part of your image to the back. So it's not hiding another part. I think it all kind of layers on top of each other, like everything layers on top of each other. So like if I was to do something like increase my exposure of this gentleman, and then leave the mask. Actually, well, here, how do I leave my mask? Okay, and then do something like increase exposure overall, right? It goes from like adjusting just that selected mask area of the subject. So that the previous adjustment was targeted on just the man, and then my new adjustment is like global, right? So it doesn't matter, like it just builds on top of each other.
Totally. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So let's pop back into, let's select our subject again. I just undid that. So I want to show you that you can rename your masks because, and again, here is the panel. If you didn't see this part, if you want to expand it, there's these little arrows on the top right. And you can also move this too, if it's in your way, or you just like to have a different setup, feel free to move that. You can even, I think, dock it into here if you prefer that option. So yeah, that's kind of cool to see. So if you want to rename it, just tap these three dots on the right and hit rename. So then I'll just say man. And then if I wanted to do something like invert the mask to select the background. So say I want to, do whatever I want to the background, kind of do a little bit of desaturation. So then, I did that totally wrong. I apologize. Okay, let me reset really quickly. Okay, let's do select subject. I just named it man and then I inverted it. So I was adjusting the background. So it was named wrong. That was my own fault. So let's go to the three dots on the bottom and hit invert. So I'm selecting my background and then do a little bit of adjustments here, maybe desaturate a little bit. And then I can do rename and name it background. And then if I want to, I can add as many masks as I want. So I can actually hit create new mask at the top, do select subject, and it will select the man again for me. And then I can make whatever adjustments I want to on this, you know, whatever I think looks good. And then I will go in and rename it. And then I'll have those two separate layers. And then as always, the backslash key will show you the before and the after. So you can see how, I mean, it's incredible how quickly and easily these select subject selections are made using that machine learning. So I wanted to show it to you on a couple of different images and show you how you can kind of refine them as well. So here's a photo. I took this on my phone, and the phone has a hard time with like darker overall tones and white balance. So what I might want to do is, you know, like come in and fix some of those things. So I can come in and open up my masking tools and do select subject. And like I said, select subject is really good, but it's not always perfect, as you'll see in this photo. So that's okay, because we can do some very high level refining with the masking tool. So here, what I might do is target the background. Like I want to make those leaves a little bit darker and warm everything up. So I want to invert this mask. So right now the background is selected and clearly it's missing a few things. So let me zoom in a little bit. And what I want to do here is now add to this mask. So I can either add to or subtract from any mask that I create. And I can do that with any of the original masking options that were provided to me, which is pretty incredible. So you can be very, very specific with these selections. I'll probably just do the brush. So I went to add and then brush, because I want to basically extend this red mask selection to the subject itself. So I can just kind of do this. And then I have my mask. And so then I can go in and make whatever adjustments I need to, like darken it, warm it up, maybe bring shadows a little bit. I don't know, it's a little bit green. Yeah. So pretty easily I can make that selection. And then of course I can rename it if I want. And then I can create a new mask where I select the subject. Actually, so you can be smart about it, right? Like I just refined the mask, but then now I'm like, oh, I have to refine it again because I forgot to do it the first time. So I've been using masking kind of like you, Benj, because I think you had access to it before it was released. I've been using it for a few months, even prior to Max, but Adobe Max in October when it was released. But it's still honestly a new tool to me as well. So I'm still learning and like figuring out, you know, the process for things like this as well.
Yeah.
So I could stand to improve a little myself, but I think it's kind of good to see some of the struggles that people have with it. So now I can do the same thing, but subtract from that mask with a brush. So, you know, just kind of brush away that part. I could have basically made the selection and then duplicated it and inverted it without having to reselect it, but this is pretty easy, so it's kind of fine for me to do this. Bring it down a little bit. So it's interesting to see how people do their editing. This is kind of green as well. Everything's kind of green. All right. So then before and after that for that particular image. And then I know a lot of people are curious about how it does with like multiple people. So I pulled up this image so you can see what happens if I do select subject on multiple people. And this background, I mean, they are fairly distinct from the background. So you'll see that you'll get varying results, and it's not always like it just selects people. You can do this on items like objects as well. So like fairly good, but you know, there's like a dark background behind his dark hair here. So you can see that it wasn't completely perfect there, but that's okay. Easy to refine with the brushes we just showed you. And then the other couple things that I wanted to show are select sky. So I wanted to show select sky on this particular image because this is one that's hard. I wouldn't have been able to do this on with a radial gradient before. Yeah. So a lot of skies are like horizon plus sky, and you can just drag a radial gradient down and it covers it, but you can't do that here. So select sky here does a fairly good job. It's quite good given the fact that there's like also blue tones in those flags. So just to show you kind of what's happening, like you can even see it in this little mask preview in that panel. It has separated the masks themselves, the flags themselves from the sky. And that's pretty cool. Very, very powerful stuff here. So it's really kind of like, we're giving you guys the tools to utilize and however you see fit. But there are like a lot of things that you can do in terms of like adding and subtracting to get more creative about things. So I can't, this like Zoom panel has hidden my, this is my photo to show you like the color range selection if you're not familiar with that. But let me go ahead and I'm trying to find a certain image and I can't see it. I'm just blindly clicking through my my little navigation thumbnails at the bottom. So because you can do any sort of combination of adding, subtracting, intersecting these masks, there's like a lot of possibilities. So it's up to you, like the sky's the limit. How do you want to utilize these tools? So as a quick example, what I can do here is do a select subject, then invert it to select the background, which is, no big surprise at this point because I've already showed you that a couple of times. Then what I could do though, to refine it, is subtract the sky. And that gets me the background minus the sky, which is pretty cool depending on what you need to do, right? And then you can go in and create a new mask, select your subject, and then, make him pop as well. Edit it to the way that you actually want it to look without overdoing it, like I'm probably doing here in my quick demo. So, and then the other thing, if you guys are not familiar with color range masking, oh, there we go, I can do it. Okay, so color range masking, luminance range masking. So those are here within this masking panel. The notable thing about how they differ now from the way that they worked before, because color and luminance range masking have been in Lightroom Classic for a while now. So they're not new in concept, but they're new in execution. So previously, they only worked if you did something like put in a gradient, like a linear or radial gradient, and then you could make your color or luminance range selection out of that selection. But now you don't even have to do that to begin with. So one example, so let me show you this as an example of how color range masking works. So right now I have no gradient, no mask, nothing on this image. And what I want to do is select the flowers to edit them to be a different color. So all I would do is click on color range and, oh, actually, let me read. I did the same thing, did I do? So let me click on color range. Wait, what? Create new mask? Okay. Wait, reset. Okay, maybe I have to delete. I'm sorry, how do you reset? It's really funny because I don't work in Lightroom Classic very much anymore. So how do I just delete this? Where's my
new mask?
Yeah. Oh, is this the new mask? Oh, this is the new mask that I created?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Wow. I apologize, people who are looking to me to be your technical leader right now. I thought that was an existing mask and I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't let me delete it, but that is the new mask. So my apologies. So when you click on, let me reset this and show you from the beginning how this works without my erroneous error. So go into your masking panel, click on color range, And you get this new mask here. And what you have to do is designate the color range that you want it to select. So I can come to my flower and I can either do a drag and make a selection across the range of colors that I want it to select, or I can do something like click and hold shift and then select a couple different points. I don't know if it's hard to see, but every time, just to show you, every time I hit click, it drops a little eyedropper. So it's actually selecting, like I'm specifying, instead of a range, different points that I want it to select. So I'm going to undo those and show you this. I'm dragging across this range because I want it to select the flowers, but hey, actually it's selecting too much. So what I want to do is go to the right and then specify here, or refine it a little bit here. So I'm just kind of pulling it down and it's kind of specifying like, hey, like don't go too far with that range. Let's keep it limited to just the like pink tones. And again, it's a little bit hard to see because my overlay is red, but all of the red tones or pink tones in the image from the flowers have been selected. So I can actually do something like go in and maybe change the hue. So I can kind of modify the colors of the image of the flower themselves. So yeah, I can just, make my pink flowers purple instead. So that's a really cool way of utilizing the color range tool. And that's something that was really difficult to do before. And it was impossible to do before if you were working in Lightroom versus Lightroom Classic. So that kind of sums up the things that I kind of wanted to showcase. Apologize for the little glitches there, but I hope that was kind of a good, kind of fairly fast overview. And I'm looking at the time and I'm realizing it was not that fast, but there's just so much to say. I want to hand it to you, Benj, because I know that we are also here to see you demo on your beautiful images.
Yeah.
So let me stop sharing.
Sweet. Yeah, well, thanks, Pei. I know that like that thing specifically with the color adjustments and being able to specifically either do the range, like click and drag, or I think it's hold shift and then click the separate ones in particular. That was the thing that when I was watching some tutorials and stuff like that I was like, wait, what? Like, I didn't even know you could do that at all. And so, yeah, so one of the things for me, I'll try to demo it, but if I don't get to it, one of the things that I've been using that for, in particular, I shoot in a lot of environments that are very green everywhere. And then the sun will come down and cast a green cast back up onto people's skin. And so what I've been doing is doing the select subject thing to get my subject's skin tones, and then going in with that color and then only selecting their skin tones and then adjusting, like adding usually more magenta into there, which then fixes the skin tones, but doesn't affect the rest of like the green tones and everything else globally, which has been fantastic. So I don't know if I'll be able to get to that, but I thought I'd explain it really quick.
Yeah, I feel like I could go back to all of my old photos and give them a like fresh new edit now that we have these tools available.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to try to get rid of some of these Q&A things and whatnot. And then we will dive over to, let's see, make sure that I have everything set up correctly. Okay. Cool. So one of the things that I run into as like a wedding photographer, I usually don't bring a lot of lighting. I don't bring a lot of reflectors. I usually don't have an assistant, all sorts of stuff. So I'm usually just relying on whatever my sensor can possibly pull for everyone to get just like things running for me. So for an image like this is something I run into all the time where my subjects themselves aren't actually they're not getting a ton of light onto them, but I don't want to destroy the background, because if you were actually there in real life, right, like you'd see something kind of like this, but that sort of just looks like garbage, right? And so with the new masking tools, one of the things that I've found has been most easy, and if you're having an issue getting your masks to do the things you want them in the AI, a thing that I've learned is that if you kind of like help Lightroom out a little bit, it can help you out to I don't know, get the things you want. So I've been adjusting down to get the general like ambient tones that I want. And then what I'll do is do what kind of Pei was talking about earlier. And you could select subject, but I need to bring up this entire range. So I'm going to select the sky, let it do its thing here. And apologies, this is like a 2016 MacBooks Pro, so it's going to take a little bit. Then what I can do is click here and do the, well, I don't even know how you exactly do it, but you can click the apostrophe key, which is like right under, you know, L, and then the colon, semicolon, and then like the quotations apostrophe. If you click that key, it will automatically just invert that mask. And then at that point, you can bring and adjust all of your things to get into some sort of range that feels more consistent. And then once I'm there, usually I either, you know, can start adjusting things to get in the range that I want them to, and then, you know, apply presets and all that kind of stuff in general. But one of the things I just found was that, sure, if you just jump in here and reset this completely, and you can see that the sky seems pretty blown out right here. And if you just hit select sky, when there's just not a lot of information for Lightroom to find unless it does the adjustments, sometimes it doesn't click all of the boxes and hit this exactly how you want it. So I usually give it kind of like a little bit of help at the beginning, because you can see that as you pull this down, some of that stuff didn't exactly do it exactly how I wanted to. So if you're having an issue getting your masking exactly how you want it, think of Lightroom or the AI tools here kind of as a person that might just want a little extra help. And then, you know, by kind of just adding some of this information in there, once you do that, you know, you can select your sky. And then if you hit that apostrophe key, that's the thing that I feel like is just brilliant, because then it just inverts that for you. You can go in here and kind of clean up, and maybe you want to warm this up to kind of match the tones a little bit more. And once you get this to a space where you feel like you're, you know, getting into a place that makes a little more sense, then you can go back and kind of globally adjust a lot of this stuff and take out some of these extra highlights and whatever, go from there. Because for me, one of the best things about this, and one of the things that I feel like makes digital photography feel different from film often, is those harsh transitions between highlights and shadows. And when you blow your highlights out on digital, it just like doesn't do usually as well as color negative film. And so that's something I'm often trying to adjust a lot, to just kind of make things feel a little bit less janky and digital in that way. But then here's like another kind of example that, you know, this wouldn't exactly work, because what's happening here in this image, this couple, you know, they just got married. They're walking in towards everybody, you know, they're walking away from the ceremony spot that is out in the middle of just sun everywhere. And then they're walking in towards a bunch of trees and things that are blocking the bounce light from coming back in on them. So the background is well lit. Their guests and everybody are pretty well lit. But then what you're running into is they are super dark, right? So if you go in here, I've already done the select subject because this one took like 30 seconds and I didn't want to wait for that. But if you go in, you can select subject, and then it's just another one of those things where you go, oh my gosh, it did a phenomenal job of getting, you know, like all of this extra information, and it got the little bits of her, you know, the thing on her bouquet here and all sorts of stuff. But we did jump in and get like a tiny bit of the background with the, you know, guests and stuff. So that's just an easy, again, kind of as Pei did, you can jump in and just go brush tool. We are in the subtract. So all you have to do is jump in here and do that. And one of the things that has been really, really great, and one of the things I believe that Lightroom Classic has that Lightroom, regular Lightroom doesn't have, is this auto mask feature. Is that correct, Pei? I think so. In the panel here, you have the auto mask, and then that'll kind of help you. It kind of guides you along the way of getting that stuff into the correct space. So once you've done that, oops, I just wanted to get out this way. Once you've done that, then you have the ability, you know, to just push your exposure up and then just blend them so much better and cleaner into the background. maybe you want to bring the shadows down a little bit just so it's not so crazy different. But then you definitely move from a very, very different image, because straight out of camera, this looked like this. And then add a preset, add the mask, and then you can pretty easily move into something like this, which then is just something that was not possible outside of me walking with them with a giant reflector. So just in a few seconds, I can basically, at least for me, replace kind of an assistant in a way for some of that stuff.
Hey, Benj, before you
Yes,
go on, there were a
please.
couple people who were asking to see that again. If you don't
Okay.
mind, they're asking for you to expand your screen or show full.
Uh-oh.
Whoa, that was
Boom.
cool.
Yeah.
So they were just asking you to either expand your screen or make it full screen so that they could see that in more detail. I
A
think
little
they
more
might have
detail.
been. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. So which part do they want to do again?
I think that maybe the auto masking part.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just do that on, I'll do that on a different image, and then we can basically see the same thing. But I'll open up my screen, and maybe what I'll do is change my preferences to just have the desktop view, the resolution be lower so that it shows up larger. Let's see, displays.
And then while you're doing that, I wanted to just say
please.
that I'm answering some of the questions. I'm actually typing the answers so that I can get to more of them. I'm not sure if we'll get to all of them because there are a lot that are coming in. So if you've asked a question, just check for the answer in the Q&A section. I think it's going to actually show up in that same Q&A pod. And then one person asked, this is, I think, really important to mention live. One person asked if they should be using Lightroom Classic for some stuff and Lightroom for other things. And I just wanted to make clear, because I didn't say that earlier, that it's really important for you to choose one or the other instead of jumping back and forth, because it can be very confusing. We don't want you to lose your images. Not that we're going to lose your images, but we don't want you to think that they're in one place and have them be in another place and then be very confused about it and then mad at us because you think we lost your images. So pick one or the other. Try not to jump between the two, because it can be very confusing if you think that your images are in the cloud when they're really at home on your desktop. So
cool. All right, let me know if because when I turn this off, I can't see you anymore, Pei. So let me know if this works better. I think it should. And then if I kind of bump this up, I think
so. Yeah,
it seems a lot bigger.
Can you tap I and get rid of your info so that it's not distracting?
Oh, sure. Do I just tap I? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So yeah, I think people are saying yes, it's better. So go ahead.
Cool. Fantastic. Okay. So here's kind of an image that allows a little bit of everything. So this is just after me clicking a preset and adding a lot of times what I'll do just to kind of help an image out a little bit. One of my favorite tools is dehaze. This is definitely not an Adobe sponsored or whatever a segment here, but I feel like for me, it like feels like smart contrast a lot of times. So I can usually add dehaze and it does a better job of like what I would want contrast to be like, even in an image that isn't hazy or anything. And then adding a little bit of saturation to an image like this. That's basically what I've done to this at this point so far. But one of the things we're running into in an image like this, which I feel like already is really beautiful, but one of the things that I want to do with the masking and whatnot is, jump in here and you can select subject. It'll pop that up. And then usually the way I do this is like, I'm a wedding photographer. I'm doing a couple, maybe 100 or so images for an engagement shoot or a shoot like this. And then anywhere between 500 and 1,000 plus wedding images at a wedding. And so my adjustments and things have to be quick and like replicable. So one of the things that I would often do is just kind of do something like this. And then the key to these masks, if you want to have images that look great at the end of the day, is going to be subtlety. So do not go in here and then just like blast the foreground and then like bring the background down to something like this and like You can do this, but I mean, it looks like that they took this photo in their front yard and then they got photoshopped onto a background or something, right? So in general, what I always feel like I want to do here with these masks is keep the subtlety. So usually I'm going less than a half a stop or something. So like here is, basically nothing. And then usually I'm going like maybe a third of a stop, maybe a half of a stop, something where I'm just getting that like little extra push, almost as if I'm like bringing in a reflector to kind of just bounce the light just a little bit more to get that separation from the background. And then what we can then do, obviously, is go in, do another mask, go select subject or select sky. We'll go select sky. Now, I do wish, I don't work for Adobe, clearly. I do wish that, as all of these have, that these had some sort of quick key custom function. And I think some people said in the chat too, or the Q&A, that it would be nice to have these to be able to sync and then automatically override in multiple images. I would also agree with that, so I'm tossing it in here. But we'll select sky. It's going to detect the sky. It's going to refine. It's going to do its work. And then again, it's one of those like, let's just be subtle about this. Let's bring it down just a little bit. Let's maybe add a tiny bit of saturation. And then with something like a sky in a like wedding image or something, it's very often opposite of something that you would see in a landscape image, where I don't actually want the sky to have a lot of detail and definition. So a lot of times I'll even just like move the clarity down and move like dehaze down a little bit or something, just because I don't actually want a lot of texture and stuff in the skies. I want the color and that kind of stuff to pop in, but I actually don't want a lot of the other stuff. Now for me, this is great. If you really wanted to get in and start refining things a lot more, you can definitely see in here that the mask grabbed a tiny bit of the snow in the mountains. And like this little mountain peak right here is, in there. But generally, you can absolutely erase those. But again, if you keep with the subtlety of all of it, it's not going to affect it in a way that is going to be too detrimental to all of that kind of stuff. And then the kind of, let's see, how much time do we have? 10:06. I think maybe what I'll do at this point is I've kind of shown the general stuff that I usually do on everything. And I think maybe what would be best at this point is to jump in and just do the Q&A section, because we'll probably get to more questions and cover more information at that point if we do that. So what do you think about that, Pei? I think that's probably where I'd want to go.
I think that works. The only thing is, though, we had a couple people asking if you could demo that green color cast on a person's face. Can you demo,
sure.
do an image ready to demo that? And then we can jump into it.
I can probably do it on this one, because we just did pull up, sorry, this computer. I should have bought an M1 Mac before we did this.
I know, I'm also on like an older MacBook, so it's kind of the same issue. I just shut down everything else before we started.
Yeah, I know. This is I'm literally only doing Zoom and Lightroom at this point. And so the only thing about this as well is I'm working off of smart previews. So it doesn't give me like the full res of everything, because again, I wanted everything to go a little bit quicker. But in this image, and let me know if this is showing up correctly. It should in a second. Yep, there we go. One of the things you can do in here is you can create a new mask if you wanted to, and you could even just like brush in the people, but we could go in with this existing mask and then, or let's just do a new mask. That'll be easier. And then we can delete everything else outside of that mask. So what you can do here is, I actually wanted to do color range, but anyway, the point being, I will delete this. We'll just do it onto this current one. So let's add, I guess you can't add color range. Would you be able to do this? I'm trying to, oops, I've never done it on this computer before. So If anybody wants a screenshot, that's what it's going to give you. And so you can go like that and kind of shift around here. You can definitely get rid of these overlays. But what you can do is either shift across. I would go, just to make it quick, let's get out of here. I would go from like the darkest part of her face right here and then go across to like either do a range like that, or you can click through and select like the darker parts and the other parts and whatnot. Because mainly it's this like little bit of a green cast that you're getting from the bounce off of her flowers that you're going to want to get rid of. And so that's kind of where you're going in that. I would love to do like a super in-depth thing on that. And maybe I can do one of those afterwards. But that's kind of generally what I do. That same thing Pei was doing with the flower thing, where you just go in with that and select the different skin tones there. And then you do it within that subject thing. So the other people in the background that don't necessarily have that cast aren't affected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually also a good use of intersecting the masks. So for instance, like in that image, the color cast, if I remember correctly, looked a little bit stronger like on just the bride's face. So you could just use like a radial gradient to select the bride's face, not even select subject for the whole subject. You could just do radial gradient on her face and then intersect it with green color arrange masking. So it would just select the green tones inside of that radial gradient so that you could target just those.
Oh,
so yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, to be honest, like I have demoed masking just a couple of times now because it is still so new, and I still feel like I kind of fumble my way through it. And not that I feel like I don't want you guys to think that like I don't know what I'm doing or Benj doesn't know what he's doing. There's like a big learning curve when it comes to masks, which is one of the reasons why I think you guys are all probably here as well. It's like you have to take a different approach to your editing and just think about things very differently in ways that you didn't have to before, because all of a sudden it's like not like we were just like, here's like 2 new things you can do. It's like, here's, 5 new things that you can do, but you can also like intersect them or add, subtract, and like intertwine them. So it's like, there's like, hundreds of new possibilities, not just like 2. So it's kind of it's like a good mental game, actually. Like I haven't been this excited about editing in a while because there's not been anything like new and exciting to come to editing in a while. So it is kind of like, all right, we're all still getting used to it, even us who've worked with it for months. So don't get frustrated if you're going through it and you're like, I don't remember what to do or how to do it or whatever. Just kind of poke and feel your way around like you do with the rest of Lightroom, because there's no way to ruin anything. Like you're not going to mess up your photo. You're not going to like do anything that you can't like take back. So
totally. Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing is like, I could have done that the way I was doing it, or we could do it with the radial thing, or we could do it with like a luminance thing or the color. There's just like all of the different tools can work into each other, and they can often you can find ways to do the exact same thing either way. There's just so many ways to go about doing it. And I found like, I don't think I've ever used the radial filter mask thing. Like, I don't think I've ever used it ever for anything. I've always just used like a luminance or like a graduated filter or other ways of getting the same thing. And so that's kind of one of the nice things is you can like fall into one of the different features and just kind of master that one and then use maybe that in a brush or whatever to get the effect you're looking for. Or you can expand your mind and use everything. But that's the nice thing is there's just a lot of tools to do similar things depending on how you want to do it.
Yeah, it's just like there's like, 3 or 4 different ways that you could do a black and white conversion before you even start refining it. It's just like the immediate like change to black and white you can do in like 4 different ways within Lightroom alone. Like if you talk about Photoshop, there's like, 20 different things that you can do over there. But yeah, 4 different ways to convert to black and white. But like, I only ever use one because that's what I like. Totally. So don't feel like you need to know and learn and master everything. So at this point, do you think that we should jump into the questions?
Totally. Yeah. Let's hit some questions. And then if we need to jump back in and like show examples or whatever we can, but I feel like there's like, I don't know, like 30 some questions. So we'll try to like grab ones that feel obvious or whatever. And I'll say too, like, I'm sure Pei, you can't answer like every question about Adobe and Lightroom in particular, but like you can hit me up on a DM about like some random editing thing. But if you have questions that are for someone that actually like works for Lightroom, this is the time. Like I would be asking you like a gazillion questions right now about like all these different things. So I feel like that's a really, really good resource in case anybody wants to ask questions. So we're going to go through them now. And if you have questions, you can jump into the Q&A section here and we'll try to get to as many as we can.
Yeah, and I'd love to start with this. I was trying to answer the questions at like typing, but it was kind of hard to get to too many of them. But one that I do see repeatedly that I wanted to start with is a couple of people who have asked if we can like sync the masking selections across different images or do like a batch edit with select subject and select sky. And unfortunately, the answer right now is no. It's just not possible because each image, you know, you saw like when we clicked on it, it's kind of processing and like doing the analysis on each image. And right now it still has to do that per image. So unfortunately, it's not possible at the moment. Who knows if it will be possible later? I'd like to think that we might get there with the technology. But also, can you imagine, you know, selecting, you know, 20 or 100 images? Because a lot of people do batch edits on like 100 or 200, like a lot of images. So can you imagine what would happen to your computer if you hit like select subject and it was had to do like individual processing of each of those images? I mean, you'd be just as mad at us as you would be like happy about the fact that this exists. So we don't wish,
as someone, like I do wish that could exist because I could just be like, I wish Lightroom would just go, you're not going to be able to do anything for 45 minutes. Go eat lunch and we'll do the work for you, but you're not going to be able to do anything. And I'd be like, all right, cool, I can do that. But I can see why everybody and their mom would hate that because they wouldn't understand that your computer would shut down and sound like a jet engine if you're not using like one of the M1 machines.
Yeah, that is actually like, so what you were saying about like, oh, just like hit a button and let it work for 45 minutes. That's basically what it was like editing weddings with Photoshop Actions before Lightroom existed, right? I would actually sit and read books while I was editing photos because I would just like start an action and then like run it on however many images and then just wait. But the syncing and batch editing using these masking tools, yes. So no, it's not possible now, but it is actually probably our most requested feature when it comes to like improving upon the masking. So who knows? I mean, I think there's obviously like logistical, technical things to take into consideration, but we know like it's definitely on our radar is like, we know people want this.
And I'll say too, like Edgar mentioned it in the chat too. So you can sync them across a bunch of images, but then you do have to go in and click like reset or like re-examine or whatever the thing might be. Maybe I'll do it on one of these images and see what the actual wording is. But it does allow you to do it, but then it has to find all that information again. So you do have to tell it again, like, oh yeah, you have to resync or do these extra issues. What does it say? Brush subject, it's going to tell me something. Subject 1 needs to be recomputed. So you can click update and then it'll update. But so you sort of can, but then you have to be on that image for Lightroom to do its work.
Right. So another question, I'm just kind of jumping around. I don't have any sort of rhyme or reason. Should you make all of these, Cassidy is asking, should you make all of these adjustments or masks before adding a preset? I think that's kind of like a personal choice, but generally speaking, yes, I believe like that would be my recommendation because it would be, by doing these selections, you're kind of getting your base tonality across the image the way that you want it to be. And then you can put that like special sauce on it with the preset. But I would say, honestly, kind of depending on your preset too, and like depending on the preset or the changes that you're making when you're doing the masking, it could go either way. So I think that is something that you'd probably have to determine for yourself by trying it one way first and then the other, and then seeing which you like better.
Totally. The way I do it is I put a preset on import. So when I import a wedding, I think like I'm going to sync this across all of these images so that I can let Lightroom like build the smart previews and all that kind of stuff and do the processing of applying that preset to everything just to save time. But as like a base, if I was doing like single images, I would probably, fix the image kind of first and then add the preset on top of it after that.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Benj, about like doing like an import preset or applying a preset like by batch across it when you do the import, because since I'm not shooting high volume anymore, I'm not shooting weddings anymore, I do everything one at a time. So I had not even really considered that kind of use case scenario as being like the perfect situation where you would do the preset first and then tweak it after. Because I think both are going to still get you great results. I don't think there's definitely not a wrong way to do it.
Totally. A question that I had too, and that I'm asked all the time that doesn't necessarily do with masks, but there was a couple questions, and I get this all the time about like, what is the best way to kind of speed up Lightroom? Because it often like can drag at times if, you are like using a zillion Chrome tabs and you are working off like full resolution images and all sorts of stuff. Like, what's kind of your take on the way to kind of speed up the process, especially if you're using a ton of, you're editing thousands of photos or whatever?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think with some of the speed complaints that people bring up, with each, we do honestly take them very seriously. And so with each release and updated version of Lightroom, there are speed improvements made, and it might be like so small, it's almost imperceptible to you. But we are clocking all of these things and we are making improvements. And I believe maybe within a year ago, there was like, because Lightroom Classic has been around for a while, which means that the code base has been around for a while. So it's kind of like, we almost have to like rebuild it to like fix all of the things that are becoming issues now that it's kind of like starting to slow down and stuff. So within the last year, there was like a pretty massive recoding of some parts of it. I don't know the technical stuff. I am not an engineer, but that did solve a lot of the issues that people were having. So it's always like, make sure you're on the newest release of Lightroom. I know a lot of people are really reluctant to update, and I'm not sure why, but always update your apps. That's like key, number one, like the best solution. You can optimize your catalog. You can also clear your cache. I think clearing your cache helps as well. So those are the recommendations that I would have.
Yeah. And then the last thing for me is that I edit everything off of smart previews, because I'm usually not going in and doing a ton of very, very detailed work that I need, like the full resolution, everything. And then you can also go into preferences in there and specifically tell Lightroom to edit from the smart previews. So you might render smart previews, but it still might be processing your full resolution files if you have those attached on a hard drive or something. So I find that as like I'm doing something with the batch stuff, hundreds of images, if not thousands, if I'm only editing off of smart previews, which are like 3-4 megapixel files versus the full res 50 megapixel files or whatever, Lightroom obviously has just less information to go off of and get kind of bogged down by. And so I find that makes everything just fly in comparison to like loading the full resolution and whatnot. So, getting smart previews, using that, or just like rendering previews on imports, that makes all that stuff go a lot faster for me, at least.
Yeah. I'm just trying to, there's so many questions. I love it. I wish I could answer all of them.
I'm like, I might have to just type answers to some of these when we're done.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Maybe we can work with Pic-Time on a way of getting people answers to their questions if we aren't able to get to them live. I'm going to just start from the bottom. I don't know if they're building from the bottom or the top.
The top is the oldest ones.
The top is the oldest. Okay.
It seems like it says by time.
So starting from the top, maybe we should just kind of run down and do that for a few minutes and then see if we can get to them.
Totally.
If we're dealing in high volume images, what would Lightroom be useful for? So Nancy, you asked this question. I think that I would say that I might have answered this earlier by just saying that we don't recommend that you use both. So if you're talking about if you're a high volume shooter and you're using Lightroom Classic, just do everything in Lightroom Classic. Don't jump back and forth between the two. And then the recommendation, like you, when I was working in Lightroom Classic, used to make a new catalog in Classic for each project. And I think a lot of people tend to do that. In thinking about it now, I wish that I had done it differently. I wish that everything had been in a single catalog. And one of the reasons for that is because, well, one, there's not really a capacity limit when it comes to the catalogs. Somebody had asked earlier and I typed an answer to it. But right now, they're like, folks on our team are like, they have over 400,000 images in a single catalog and they run fine. So there's not really a size limitation to catalogs the way that there might have been, when it first launched 15 years ago. So I would say keep everything in a single catalog. I wish I had done that because right now we can sync with Lightroom. We can sync Lightroom Classic with Lightroom, but like I said, we can only sync one catalog at a time. So essentially that syncing between Classic and Lightroom is useless for me because I have, hundreds of catalogs. So I wish I had done it differently. So if you're at a point where you can kind of just start fresh and keep everything in a single catalog, then I would recommend that.
Yeah. And you can import old catalogs into like a new master catalog if you want. Because I used to do that too. I used to, just for like redundancy's sake, I would like back up a new catalog and put it into like my NAS server and all sorts of stuff and make sure that it was safe. And then I would, do all that stuff. But I have like 30,000 photos in my catalog now. And I'm considering going back and just re-importing all of those old ones. And then on Lightroom Classic, you can actually make folders in like smart collections, I believe it's called, that you can allow those to be the ones that are actually synced to like the Lightroom cloud. So I always have like my current projects are the ones that are being synced out of my Lightroom Classic catalog. Like I have all my personal photos and then all of my current weddings and stuff that I might need right away are the ones that are synced onto my phone. So I can either like, I've been culling a wedding while I was like in line to get on a flight at one point, or like I went to the DMV and I was culling and editing a wedding on my iPad. And then those edits go straight into Lightroom Classic as well. It's not as easily integrated, obviously, as like the regular Lightroom ecosystem thing is, but you can still do a lot of syncing in Lightroom Classic to the other apps and vice versa, which I feel like barely anybody understands or knows about.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like your description of how you utilize the syncing between Classic and cloud-based Lightroom is exactly what it was built for. So it's like, we know that you need to and want to work in Classic, but let us enable you to also do some of this work while you're on the go by allowing you to sync a collection and get those smart previews and then do editing on the go on your phone. And then when you get back home, all of that will be reflected in Lightroom Classic on your computer. So
totally. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Donna actually makes a really good point where she said that if you're outsourcing your editing, it doesn't work to have everything in a single catalog. And yes, I agree. I have outsourced a shoot before, and so I know what that process is like. And I agree. You can't do that with a consolidated catalog of like, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of images. But what you can do is do the wedding, you just have to like re-envision what your workflow is going to be. Maybe it's that you have these catalogs that you outsource and get that from, refine it, and then once everything's done, you bring it into your main Lightroom catalog to just actually legitimately catalog it with the rest of your images so that they're accessible. And then you could delete once you're done, that you no longer need the individual catalog, you could delete that, or you can just kind of like hold on to it for posterity. Abul Shah is asking about cataloging. They create a new catalog for every wedding in Classic. Should I do the same in CC for weddings or just have one larger catalog? So a couple things. First, CC doesn't exist as a name anymore. So it's just Lightroom. And I know that it takes some getting used to. I have to call out Adobe employees for doing the same thing. So it's actually a pet peeve of mine. So I just like call people on it. But CC doesn't exist anymore. Catalogs do not exist in Lightroom. So the cloud-based Lightroom does not have catalogs. So everything would just have to be in one big place. But there's folders and albums and you can nestle them and everything. So there is organization within Lightroom on the cloud. It just is not catalog-based the way that Lightroom Classic is. And then, are there any questions that you wanted to jump in with, or do you want me to just keep going down the road?
No, you can keep going. I think a lot of them are just pertaining to like future suggestions for Lightroom and why can't we have HSL and like things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like what I can do is I'll just keep going down, and then maybe if you skim them, if there's any like really like the questions that you think would be relevant for like the broader group, then we can answer those live.
Totally.
And then I see a few people have individual questions. Like Krista had a question, and I can just respond to that.
Totally.
We can respond to those separately later.
Yeah, I see one right here from Cassidy. She asks, like, isn't Lightroom Classic a lossless platform? So when jumping into Photoshop to liquefy something like a double chin or something like that, you would lose quality, or is it not enough to notice? Lightroom Classic, yeah, it's totally lossless in that at any point you can go back in the history panel and, you know, just go back to anything that you wanted prior to that. It's not like when you save a Photoshop document or whatever and you lose like the history once it's saved or whatever. So yeah, the raw files remain raw files, and you can go back as far as you want.
Yeah, and then so her question I think was in response to another answer I had provided about whether or not there would be liquefy within Lightroom. And Lightroom, if you guys didn't see the written response to that, Lightroom is meant to be a tool where you enhance the image as is. It's not meant to transform your image, meaning like we're not going to give you tools like liquefy that will make you like change the shape of a person's face or body or something like that. So it's really just like changing the tone and the color and contrast and stuff like that to like enhance what's present in your image. So her question about then like the losslessness or like the loss that you would encounter if you were to open it in Photoshop and then take it back to Lightroom is like, there's probably some minute level of loss when you do that process, but certainly nothing that's noticeable. I think that when we talk about this, a lot of people get held up on this idea of like opening it in one program and then saving it as a JPEG, which is, you know, then like you can lose data if you open it in another program and then save it again. So like you can open it and close it in a bunch of different programs. And then over the time, the quality does degrade technically, like ever so slightly. But even I've done that multiple times, especially like editing on my phone before Lightroom Mobile existed. I was like editing in like 5 different apps. The quality difference is like, it's so subtle and like imperceptible that it's not something that I would spend a lot of time being concerned about.
Totally. Yeah. One of the other, the questions that I saw come up in some of the stuff that I've done as well is the way that masks worked previously. The panel, like maybe someone does the same thing all the time, and the panel will like, someone said that they usually have an exposure of plus 0.28 for like an exposure boost. And that's like the thing that they do all the time. But the panel now in the new one resets to 0, like it zeroes out all the sliders. And they're just wondering if there's a way to get that back.
I think there's an option.
Have to, like, go through.
There's an option where you can choose if it does reset to 0 or not. So I would have to find it.
I know. I'm like, now I have to look.
Yeah. There's
but I figured I'd ask you in case you knew.
So if you go into, I think it's, okay. So let me share.
Yeah, it's something I've actually been wondering too. And reset sliders automatically.
Yeah. So right on the panel down underneath, like, you know, all of your like exposure, temperature, whatever. At the bottom, it says reset sliders automatically or not. So you can just turn that on or off based on what your preference is. I think, you know, one of the reasons we did introduce it is because people wanted their sliders to be reset automatically. But like so many people, especially if you've been using it for a while, you get used to the way that it has been. Totally.
Yeah, that's super helpful because there's definitely been a ton of times where it's been annoying to me. I'm like, I don't want those settings now, but yeah, that's super helpful. And I've known that there's been a ton of people asking me about that specifically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it looks like we have a guest from Pic-Time ready to jump on. So let's go on over to Narit from Pic-Time, and then if we didn't answer your question, we will do our best to make sure we answer them in some way, whether it be
we'll screenshot all those or something.
Yeah. So let's just make sure we save all of the questions and the chat so that we can do that later. Hi, Narit.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I just I told Aga, which is like organizing everything. I just told her that I want to jump in and thank you both for this great webinar. I think that I was watching the whole thing, and there's something so generous and pleasant in both of you that going through some technical things can be something that is like heavy and tiring, but you did it in such a great way, so pleasant and so open to share and very, very generous with that. So I really want to thank you both for doing that. Pei, for coming here. I think it's the first time we have someone from Adobe, so it's a great it's a great honor. And Benj, we know you for a long time, and I think that showing your edits and how since you were working with it for a few months, I think it's so beneficial to you've tested it, what's working for you, so it has such a great value. So I feel it was a great value for all our community, and that's it. I just wanted to jump in and thank you, and I'll definitely use everything I saw here today, because I'm working in Pic-Time and I didn't have time to catch up with what's going on Lightroom masks. So that's really great.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you. I know that for me, like one of the reasons that I was even telling Pei earlier that like I said yes to doing this is because I feel that same way about you guys with Pic-Time. Like I just love that anytime even I get on the chat to talk to somebody about like an issue that I'm having behind the scenes or something, or like I have a question, it's usually someone's picking up on the other end and typing back and then being like, hey, by the way, it's this person or this person. Like almost every time I'm talking to somebody that's actually a photographer and then I know. Yeah. And so that's definitely something that I love just about Pic-Time, as well as obviously I'm a user of both your things for my galleries and then like the whole art gallery thing as well. And so and then just anytime I get to talk to you, Nurit, like to be honest, like is just a pleasure and a joy. And so all the things you were saying about how we were, I guess, discussing this is, I don't know, one of the reasons I always feel great about doing stuff with you guys. So
great, thanks. It's
really completely
embarrassing and great. It's like always, I don't know when I hear these things, like what do I do with this information? Like I'm getting red and that's it. But I think we have a mutual kind of appreciation between all of us. And I feel that like the people that are, the photographers that are here today and our team as well are very grateful for this great webinar. So thank you so much. It will be recorded. I'm sure people will watch it. And that's it. It was great. Just absolutely great.
Totally.
I think that the chat is also filling with, oh, somebody said, Toda. So it's someone from Israel. I'm sure that everyone are very grateful for this one. So
yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a privilege and a pleasure to be here, speaking to the Pic-Time community with Benj, and to see you, Nurit, and to work with you as always. There's so many. I love that there's so many questions, and I love talking about this. So I feel like I could do this all day, but I do have other work to get done. So it's been a pleasure.
We could literally do this for like we could do this until 5 p.m. easily with all the different things and go through all the questions and stuff. Like that's what I do love about it. Is there is so much depth and so much further beyond what we could possibly get to in an hour and a half or whatever. And so, yeah, if anybody has any questions and wants to hit me up about a specific thing, like you can find me on Instagram, send me a DM or whatever. I'm fine with sharing some extra stuff about that. I also did a YouTube video about this that explains like a little bit more than I did at this point. So you can jump in and comment on that too. And then Pei, you're just like a brilliant person that
we wrote each one of your IGs because
perfect.
We asked about it. And your YouTube channel is, I'm guessing that they will find their way from
it's just my name. Yeah, it's fine.
Instagram. You have a link there, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm also open to inquiries via DM as well. So I'll
That's
do my best
amazing.
to get to all of them.
That's really amazing. Oh, somebody has your
Oh,
YouTube
there we go.
here. I think it's Aga. Yeah, that's great.
Cool.
So everything is here on the side. Pei's account, Benj, and Ben's YouTube. So I guess this is the end. It's not the end, but you know.
Yeah.
But this is for this time, for this round. I know that it's like it's like Pic-Time, you know. There's so much. It's so many layers of information.
Yeah.
But I feel that like a lot of useful things happened here today. So thank you so much. And
Thank
have
you.
a great day, your morning.